In this tutorial, we will be talking about patch files, how to change or extend a configuration without changing the original file. Welcome to this tutorial on how to use patch files in Sitecore. As an example, we will create 4 patch files. We will add an additional processor before and after the item resolver processor, and we will use patch instead to replace the current implementation of the item resolver processor. We will also be changing a default link manager to demonstrate how patch attribute works. So let's open up Visual Studio and see how we can create these patch files. Before we start talking about patch files, let me show you a very useful page where you can check the current Sitecore configurations. If you want to make sure that your changes have been applied properly, you can open up the Show Config page and search for a section or an attribute that you've modified. This is one of the admin tools available on the Sitecore admin page. So if you navigate to your domain Sitecore admin, you'll see a choice of different tools that can help you maintain the website or debug the issue. At the bottom, there is a link to the Show Config page. You can also navigate directly to this page by typing your domain Sitecore admin showconfig.aspx. Let's search for item resolver. This is a processor that resolves items during the HTTP request. And first, let's say we want to add an additional processor before or after item resolver. We need to use a patch file to add a new processor, and we can specify exactly where we want to add this processor. So let's create a file first. Because Sitecore processes config files in alphabetical order, to make sure that our files are processed last, we need to create a folder, and we need to name it Z plus whatever is appropriate for a solution, but we need to start from Z. I'm going to call it Z Site Custom, and I'm going to add all my custom patch files to this folder. Let's create 2 patch files named before item resolver and after item resolver. So we have Sitecore, pipelines, and HTTP request begin because we will be adding our custom processor to this section. And you can check this in the config file if you are not sure. So we have HTTP request begin and item resolver. In the file, we need to define a type, which is our implementation of before item resolver or after item resolver processor. And also we need to specify whether we want to add it before or after the processor that we specified in quotes. So we have 2 processors. A processor that we want to add before and another one that we want to add after the item resolver processor. If I deploy it to my local environment and refresh the Show Config page, as you can see, we have one processor before and another after item resolver. So we can patch before, we can patch after, we can also use patch instead. So let's remove these 2 patch files and let's create a new patch instead. We do everything in the same way, only the keyword is different. So in this case, we will use patch instead. And as you can see, if I refresh the Show Config page, we now have instead item resolver, and we no longer see the original item resolver. On the Show Config page, you can find very useful information about the patch source. So this is the file with the patch, and you can simply open this file and modify it if needed, or at least you can debug this custom implementation. The last thing I'd like to show you is how to patch attributes. So let's create a new patch file. Let's call it link manager, and we will be changing a default provider. So we have Sitecore section, link manager, then patch attribute, and we are currently changing a default provider to custom link manager. We are adding our custom link provider after Sitecore link provider. So let's save it, deploy, and refresh the Show Config page. If we search for custom link provider, as you can see, the default provider is our custom link provider, and our implementation has been added to the providers section. During this tutorial, we've seen how to create patch files. We've created files with patch before, patch after, patch instead, and patch attribute. We've also checked the current configuration by going to the show config page to make sure that our changes have been applied properly. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. My name is Piotr Wegner and I see you next time.